Can you use food dye to colour play cloths? Well, the answer is yes, you can, but the result may not be what you would expect. Here is some cotton muslin fabric that I have dyed using food colour. As you can tell, they're very pale and pastel colours. This is blue, green, yellow, orange, red and purple. When I made these, I put quite a large amount of food dye into the water. It wasn't very diluted at all. And as you can see, I still don't have very dark fabrics here. Now, that's because cotton doesn't really like food dye. Yes, you can dye it using food dye, but as you see, the result is quite light. Now, just for a comparison, both of these, my cotton cloth here and my wool, have been dyed using green food dye. As you can tell, the cloth here is very, very light. I'm not even sure you can tell that's green. Okay, so that's very light. And I did use a lot of food dye when I was dyeing this. In comparison to my wool, which I used very diluted dye in the water. This is just green and this is green with a bit of yellow. And you can tell that the wool has absorbed the dye much better than the cotton. So why would you use food dye to dye fabric? The main reason is that a lot of people have food dye in their homes already, and it's a good introduction to dyeing if you've never dyed anything before. I still think these colours look quite lovely. They could make a nice mobile for a baby's room, or even the play cloths that your children play with. They may not mind if they're light pastel colours. If you would like to have a try at dyeing fabrics, I highly recommend food dye as a good starting point. Now I'm going to run through a quick tutorial on how to use food colouring to dye fabric. This method works really well to dye natural fibres such as wool, mohair, cashmere and silk. I'm in the kitchen now and I'm ready to dye our fabric using food dye. The only things I really have is my selection of food dye colours, vinegar, a pot of cold water, a piece of paper towel, a spoon and some tongs. Now when you select a pot, the only consideration you need is, does my piece of fabric fit into this pot? If the answer is yes, then you're good to go. Although, if you do end up scrunching your fabric more, you may end up with some darker patches and some lighter patches. So, let's start by mixing colours. I haven't added the vinegar to the water yet because quite often when I'm mixing colours, I get the colours wrong and I have to ditch the whole pot of water and start again. So I'm going to start with purple today because purple is the colour that I have the most trouble with. So I find that blue and pink mixed together makes a nicer purple than blue and red. So I've added some pink and some blue. I just give the whole thing a stir. It looks quite dark, but I don't think it will be. So this is what my paper towel is here for. So I can see that is barely any colour on there at all. Definitely the pink is not showing up. So I'm going to go ahead and put some more pink in. Okay, still I don't have much colour here. So let's try add some more blue. And I'll add a little more pink while I'm at it. Let's see how this looks. It does look very dark, but you can see by my spoon here that it's really not that dark. It's not very purple either. No, it's a little bit. Now I'm going to add some pink to try to make it that purple colour. Right, what have we got? Oh, okay, that looks like a fairly dark purple. And I can see over here that it's colouring my paper towel. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead. First I'll put the lids back on the food dye. We have had a few accidents with food dye before. Now, a good glug of vinegar. And all we're going to do now is take our cloth and put it inside. I'm going to use the tongs because I don't fancy having purple hands today. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this to the stove, and I'm going to heat up the water until it's steaming, and then I'm going to let the fabric cool in the water before I rinse it out. So on the stove, all I need to do is turn it on and wait for this to heat up. We'll notice that the steam starts to rise. I definitely do not want this to boil. So as soon as I notice the steam, I'm going to give it a stir, then I will turn the heat off and put it over to the side. I don't want it to sit on the hot element because I definitely don't want this to boil. I now have 6 pots of colour here in varying degrees of temperature. So I'm just going to let them sit here for a couple of hours until they all cool down completely. Now that my pots are cold, I'm going to go ahead and tip out the dye. I'm going to run some cold water over this. Tip out the dye completely. I'm going to fill this pot back up with cold water. I'm then going to add some vinegar to it, and once I have rinsed out my play cloth, I'll be putting it into this pot with the vinegar and water. Now I'm just going to rinse out this play cloth. Now this was my purple. It's looking quite pink. I keep rinsing until my water runs clear. Now what I'm going to do is add my vinegar to my pot. Then I'm just going to drop this in. Squeeze out the excess, and then I'll hang this on the line to dry. It shouldn't take long because the fabric is quite thin. After the purple fabric was dried, I really wanted to see if I could make it darker and more purple and less pink by repeating the colouring process. So this is me rinsing the fabric out after it was coloured a second time. It definitely isn't the purple that I was hoping for, although it is a little bit darker. So here we are at the end of our dyeing process. My play cloths have been dried and now they're folded, ready for playing with. This is what they look like. This is the yellow, the green, the blue, the orange, red and purple. Now I wanted to pull this one out in particular because this is the purple fabric that I dyed twice, and it's a little bit darker than the others. And it just shows that cotton fabric can be dyed using food dye, but the results may not be quite what you were expecting. Thank you for watching, and if you found this video helpful, show your support by giving it a like. And if you'd like to stay updated with all of my new tutorials, please subscribe.